Hello everybody and welcome to another Doctor Who review. This is the 50th review of this strand and it has to be Patrick Troughton's swan song. It is The War Games. As always, I have the television companion and I'm about to read the plot synopsis for this story. The TARDIS arrives on a planet where a race only known as the Aliens have gathered soldiers from a number of different wars in Earth's history, brainwashed them and put them to battle. Their aim is to form an invincible army from the survivors and use this to take over the galaxy. The Warlord is assisted by a security chief and a war chief, the latter of which the Doctor quickly recognises as a member of his own race, the Time Lords. The war chief has provided the aliens with the time vessel Sidrats that are essential to their scheme, but he secretly plans to double-cross them and seize power for himself. When the Warlord learns of the war chief's duplicity, he has him shot down by guards. By this time, however, the Doctor, aided by a band of human resistance fighters who have shaken off the aliens' control, has already managed to put a stop to the war games. Unfortunately, he has no way of returning all the human soldiers to their proper times and places, and so has to call on the Time Lords for help. Having thus revealed his position to them, he is taken prisoner, placed on trial for the crime of interfering in the affairs of other races, and subsequently sentenced to a period of exile on Earth. Jamie and Zoe, meanwhile, are sent back to their own respective points of origin. Before being dispatched to begin his exile, the Doctor is told that he must again take on a new appearance. So we come to the last story of Patrick Troughton's era, starring Patrick Troughton as the second Doctor, of course, and Fraser Hines as Jamie and Wendy Padbury as Zoe. Now, I have only just reviewed the Crotons a couple of episodes ago, and didn't really have much to say about the relationship between Jamie and the Doctor, because Jamie was kind of sidelined in this one. Not so much in this story. There's a few production bits and pieces in this one that make it an interesting length, and it is the longest story it's the longest story I'll review, probably now until we get to the new series. But it is the longest story of Patrick Troughton's run. 10 episodes. You would have thought maybe that would be a bit of a problem to get through, but actually the pacing isn't too bad. And yes, there's back and forths to different locations, and you can tell there's potentially budgetary constraints, but overall the whole plot line is actually quite well plotted, well timed, and it doesn't feel that repetitive or boring that some longer stories can feel. There are, of course, new revelations here. We finally know the name of the Doctor's people. We finally have a basic idea why the Doctor ran away all those time ago. And we basically have the introduction of another member of the Doctor's race, although he does seem to have his demise by the end of the story. But it's interesting to have that element come into play, and you do get a feeling potentially that this was the end, and then they had to change it. I don't think that was true. I think they were willing to do another series with another Doctor, because Patrick Troughton decided he wanted to leave at this point. But it's an interesting story overall to watch. It's very enjoyable, and I'll get into some of the interesting plot points I found about it later on. Let's get into the cast, though, and just have a look at all the casts we've got. We've got, of course, the Doctor himself, Patrick Troughton. We are seeing a kind of highlights of all the elements of the Doctor here. We have the slight scaredy cat second Doctor coming out at times here. The fallibility and the stupidity aspect that he plays up on some stories isn't there as much. It's pretty obvious from the start. His intelligence is shining through most of this. None of the characters really take him as a fool in the sense of being stupid. They take him as a fool in the sense of getting involved. I love the fact that obviously the Doctor feels that at the end of this is too big a problem for him to solve, and he's forced to call in the Time Lords. I love that factor of it. But there's lots of interesting bits and pieces with this story in regards to Troughton's character. We see the sonic screwdriver, we see his scientific knowledge, we see his playing up a character. A couple of times he's like brazen in his characterization. The first time is the characterization he has with the... it's when he's trying to get Jamie back from the prison, and he plays that inspector from the War Office, that kind of pompous, argumentative character who bluffs his way through everything. The second one is the one where he's playing with the scientist and learning about the processing machine and how that works, and the way he gets the scientist on his side a little bit for a bit, and that manipulation there. There's a couple of times he's very good at manipulation. That's something that Troughton is not known for. He's known for more the bumbling, homely uncle, not uncle. Get that right eventually. So overall, it is a interesting portrayal. It's certainly a culmination of everything that Troughton learnt of the Doctor. You see elements of everything of this Doctor. There's some stories you think he's a fool and he plays the fool, and there's others where he shows his full intelligence and his scheming, his planning, and this story has beats of each part of the Doctor's character that we've known from the second Doctor throughout. Troughton plays it flawlessly. There's nothing wrong with his portrayal. Every word he says you believe. There's no sense of irony in what he's saying, and you really warm to him with his predicament, especially the bit when he's been manipulated by the War Chief and has to play along with the fact that he's betraying his friends and all the resistance fighters. He isn't, but that's what it comes across as. You've then got Fraser Hines playing Jamie. We're seeing the best of Jamie here. We're seeing the inquisitive Doctor-companion relationship. You can tell the warmth is there between all the cast, the main cast. I like Jamie for his loyalty to the Doctor, and he tries to show his toughness when he needs to. But there's also elements here, and you can tell he's had a lot of time to learn from the Doctor, because he's not so much of making silly comments as he was before. These questions he's asking are more based on what's happening. His understanding of what's happened before is there. There's some bits he doesn't quite get in the 1917 zone, but all the characters used at various points to be inquisitive and help develop the plot along, and it's well written in that respect. But I like Jamie's character in this. It's the last time we see Jamie, of course, until the two Doctors. But yeah, I mean, it's difficult to point out what makes it, because when you've got a character that clicks, they just click. They just get on with it. You know the character, you know the foibles, you know the pros and cons of the character, and it's difficult to describe certain elements and certain points in here. There is a couple of bits of Jamie which I'll go through when we go through some of the scenes, which I quite like, the relationship between him and Zoe. Speaking of Zoe, Wendy Padbury's intelligence isn't used as much really as it was in the Crotons. There's kind of like a half and half between the Doctor and Zoe here in regards to who's intelligent, who's not, and who's using what and where. I do like the whole thing with Zoe and her character, and always have done. I think Wendy Padbury plays it brilliantly with that, and some of the questions and the disdain she has, and her kind of high mightiness that you see a little bit in Wheel in Space comes back again when the Doctor gets tried by Smythe in the end of the first episode, and you haven't proven anything. There's no evidence there, and she was getting really quite disingenuous, understandably, I suppose, under the circumstances. But overall, it's like Jamie. There's only so much you like, and there's only so much you don't. And it's a strange one, but it's a fun one, a fun relationship here. And there's elements in what they do, which shows the strength, which we'll come into a bit more. Now we have 30, 40 characters here that I could go through with actors. I'm going to go through some of the ones that stand out for me. First one is Jennifer, Lady Jennifer, played by Jane Sherman, who's actually the wife of Derek Sherman, the producer of this story. She only plays the first 5 episodes as the ambulance driver, the female ambulance driver. You can tell there's kind of a relationship building with her and Lieutenant Carstairs. And it's a nice, cute performance. It works. This kind of middle class woman who's helping out the field. She's a little bit spunky. She falls into the kind of female role model a little bit with the I'll take calls, I'll be the secretary, that sort of thing. But it does work. You've then got Lieutenant Carstairs, played by David Saville, who appears back in the 5 Doctors. I've done the review for that already. Link. But the 5 Doctors. This is he's probably the most consistent of the cast members. He's probably the guest character that lasts the longest, because he's there until episode 9, and he comes along and joins all the way through. The fact that he slowly realises that, where he's fighting is not actually World War One battlefield, it's something different. He's the one that learns, he's the one that goes for the biggest journey from the beginning, to somebody who really wants to fight and help with the resistance. And it's interesting he takes the leadership role once Russell and the rest come into play because of rank. And I thought that was quite interesting how that all works. Then we have the interesting character of Noel Coleman as Smythe, who is basically the big enemy of the first few episodes, trying to be this affable general who uses his hypnotism powers with the spectacles to control his staffing, and he comes back with vengeance because of all the mess that the Doctor makes for him in the first 3 episodes, and it's been very selfish when he comes back at the end of episode 7, and he gets his comeuppance. But it's a lovely role that he plays there. Yeah, we got Von Veik, played by David Garfield. Now, he starts off in the German 1917 zone, but he's also there as a Confederate general in the American Civil War zone, so it shows that the character does work a bit. Again, it's kind of like the enemy side. It shows the other side of there's more than one general effectively in each war zone of the aliens. He's more of a prisoner really with the rebellion, the resistance in the later episodes he's in, but it's a good enough performance. I like it. There's elements of it that I'll come back to. The standouts really are the main aliens of the War Chief and Security Chief of Edward Brayshaw, who plays the War Chief. His cold, calculating, consistent, accurate speech when he's planning, or he's got the trying to give the authority with the War Chief, the Security Chief, and the tension between them two. You can tell he's evil. You can tell he's more intelligent. Brayshaw plays it in a way that you think, oh, this person can't be trifled with. He's brainy enough. Then you've got the brilliant character James Bree as the Security Chief. Now, he has a kind of how do you call it? It's kind of like the warlord sort of voice that goes through all the way, and every syllable is described in such a way to make him seem so by the book, but also very suspicious of the War Chief. And it's that sort of phrasing, and you can tell why the War Chief gets annoyed with him, because he's kind of like a pen pusher who is very suspicious for his role as Security Chief at the end of the day. And the tension between the War Chief and the Security Chief works well, and I think the two of them bounce off throughout the whole time that they're on screen together, and it does make for the conflict to make it more interesting, another subplot within this. So yeah, James Bree nails it with the character there, along with Ed Brayshaw with the War Chief. It's brilliant. We then got, of course, the return of Philip Maddock as the Warlord. Now, there's 2 parts to this character here. There's kind of shouting, commanding side, and then there's a very quiet and very, very scheming side of the Warlord. And it's the Warlord who manages to get the Doctor back from the chateau when the Resistance are sitting at the chateau in the World War One zone. And it's his thinking and his planning. You can tell he's the leader, and he becomes the referee between the Security Chief and the War Chief in the later episodes, because they're always bickering. And he's into the end of the last episode, and the best bit, I think, is the bit where the Time Lords interrogate him in this trial in episode 10, and they use their mental powers to cause him to be in pain with a light in his mind. And before he turns around again to face and answer the questions, because he's been refusing to answer questions up to this point, he puts his glasses back on, so he takes his glasses off in the pain, puts them back on, straightens up his tunic, and then turns around and seems defiant. And that shows the arrogance of the character, the arrogance of the man, and Philip Maddock plays it brilliantly. A man who turns up a lot in David Maloney's stuff in the next few years. He doesn't really make much of an appearance again, I don't think, until the beginning of the Fourth Doctor's era, but he is used quite a bit in stories going forward. But this is his second appearance in the year, which is interesting. But Philip Maddock's brilliant with the plot roles he plays, and he doesn't seem to put foot wrong in anything he does, and he's proved it again here. It's a great little story to have him in, and he plays it brilliantly. There are a couple of more characters of note. We have David Troughton, who plays Private Moore, who's guarding Von Veich in episode 6 before he gets shot. And Von Veich's trying to use his hypnotism with his monocle to hypnotise Moore to untie him and let him escape. And it's interesting seeing David Troughton there. I think it's the only instance I understand for a good 15 years where the son of a doctor actually comes on screen and starts acting alongside. I think that's quite interesting. It's nearly 20 years, actually. It is virtually 20 years. You'll need to find out who I'm talking about with that, but the one 20 years later is uncredited. But even so, it's interesting seeing David Troughton. David Troughton, of course, will return in Peladon, Curse of Peladon, back in John Pertwee's era, and appears again later in Midnight and David Tennant's era, so he's made a few appearances over time. But it's interesting seeing one of the early roles for Troughton, and it's nice having that nice cameo there. There are loads of other characters, but I just want to go through one of the Time Lords, because you've got the 3 Time Lords of Bernard Horsfall, Trevor Martin, and Clyde Pullet. Trevor Martin doesn't appear again as a Time Lord. Clyde Pullet does in the 3 Doctors, which you'll know more about soon. And you also have Bernard Horsfall to return as a Time Lord, but a different Time Lord in The Deadly Assassin. Bernard Horsfall's another one of Dave Maloney's regulars, and he seems to be the leader of the 3 Time Lords, but he's also probably the most he's maybe not the most sympathetic, but he's probably the most straight down the line of the 3 of them. And I find it really interesting how he makes a brief appearance, but he makes such a big appearance in this. And it's really good. So, that's some of the characters. Let's go through some of the good bits of this. There's quite a bit here. The hypnotism with glasses and spy glasses. That seems to be how the aliens control all the process soldiers when they start to dither, or they have a question and they need to be led along a certain line. Smythe very good with the glasses. Very sinister when he's doing the hypnotism. Von Veich's got the monocle, which is on his eye, which I think is really cool to have, and it's an interesting way of utilising the hypnotism. It doesn't have to be glasses; it can also be the monocle, and it's an interesting aspect of mind control. There are 2 times where the Doctor shows tenderness in his goodbyes to his companions. The first one is when he's going to be shot at the beginning of episode 1, and his kiss on the forehead of Zoe as he walked away to be led away to be shot, and the tenderness of that was lovely. And also obviously the end scene in episode 10 when Jamie and Zoe finally are taken away by the Time Lords to return to their own times, with just the first adventures in their memories. And the tenderness of that goodbye scene as well, Troughton going like this when he's waving goodbye, and that just the cuteness of it. I love those 2 scenes, and shows how much the 3 of them work together in such a warm relationship. It's brilliant. Dr. John Smith is mentioned here. It's mentioned to the German officer in the German lines when they go over the German side of the 1917 zone in one of the early episodes. The sonic screwdrivers are used multiple times. It's used to open up the door. You open up a wall panel, a magnetic wall panel, when they're trying to get into the scientist's room, the processing room, so they can get the processing device. They've also got the screwdriver scene when it's used to rotate up the screw and rotate back down the screw again. And the sonic screwdriver is becoming more and more common throughout the series. At this point, it becomes a staple of the Doctor after this. It's usually Pertwee that really makes it the staple of the Doctor's arsenal to this present day, with a blip in the 80s. But the sonic screwdriver starting to be used more and more. It's not quite the sonic screwdriver we know yet. It's more like a torchlight, a little mini torchlight at the moment. But it's still an interesting device, and it is starting to be used more and more for more and more things to escape. And I think it's the first time it's been used to open something in the series, if I'm right, as in open a door or open a wall somewhere so they can get in. That's interesting. I've mentioned about the interplay between the War Chief and the Security Chief, which is really cool. The interplay between James Bree and Edward Brayshaw builds the tension. it builds up as over the episodes that they're in. The suspicion between the two of them is brilliant. Edward Brayshaw thinks he's got, the war chief thinks he's got superiority, but the security chief's very conniving, and the recordings that catch the war chief out is very sneaky and very subtle, but very much in character. And those two, the interplay is absolutely fantastic, and it's worth a watch just for that. The first mention of the Time Lords is in episode 6, not in episode 8, as most people think, because that's obviously when the Time Lords are first mentioned properly. And it's mentioned by the security chief about the Time Lords, which is interesting. So the Time Lords mention is earlier than most people think in the War Games, which is interesting. We've got the scene with Jamie and Zoe, when Zoe's got Jamie to become the other leader of the resistance, when Russell is away trying to get some of the rebel leaders to come to the chateau, when the resistance part of the plan that Doctor has to try and take down everything in this planet that's been used as a war games, and Russell's away, and Zoe dresses Jamie up in a way that makes him look kind of leader, so he can speak to Arturo Villar, and it's a funny scene because Zoe's doing a bit of talking, introduced James Robert McCrimmon, Jamie, trying to get him to come in because he was being a bit nervous, and that kind of interplay is actually quite fun and quite funny. The plot itself, it's written by Terence Dicks and Malcolm Hulke, and you can see influences of each of them. Terence Dicks is very good at getting lots of elements together and putting them in an order that really works. He's proven that in the 5 Doctors we reviewed before. All these disparate elements come together brilliantly. His plotting for this is brilliant as well, but I think the extra element in the War Games that makes it interesting is kind of the undertones of war being a bad thing and how terrible it is, and the kind of anti-establishment feeling you get with this story. And that comes probably from Malcolm Hulke, who was very much a left-leaning, left-wing writer in his influences and writings, and you see that a lot more in the era of Pertwee. Overall, you would expect 10 episodes of them running between different war zones to be boring. There is runaround, but it's interesting runaround. It's not like they're just going, right, okay, we've got plot A, go to plot B, not much in between. Terence Dicks is very good at doing plot A to B, but putting something interesting in and twist every time. So, for example, with that, the bit to reveal the plot a bit more is when they're travelling through the zones in the ambulance, and they go through to the Roman zone, and this whole thing of, oh, it's Romans, right, we better go back, or we can't go that way, the Romans are charging after us, and they come back. That's an interesting take. Just overall, there's lots of plot points like that, and the way it works up. Now, the story kind of wraps up quite well within episode 9 in regards to the situation that's built up, and the stakes get higher and higher and higher and higher and higher, and the fact the Doctor admits that he can't fix it is an interesting plot point, because up to this point, Doctor's always tried to do something and always been able to fix it. This is the first time I think the Doctor's admitted defeat, really, and it's intriguing and interesting to see that. I think overall, it's a romp of a watch. 2, 3, and 4 can be a little bit dragging if you're not in the mood, but it picks up a pace from 5 onwards. It really does. And the interplay, I think the interplay with some of the characters and the way it's written, especially the War Chief and Security Chief, make the episodes go along at a pace, and that subplot really does make a difference to the rest of the story. So it's really good to see. So the writing overall is actually pretty solid. The direction is fairly action-packed. David Maloney's very good at the action-packed. The explosions in the war zones, the fighting. There's usually one fight scene an episode at least. The one where the security guard's getting punched between Villar, Russell, and Jamie when they're trying to escape in episode 8 is quite funny, because the guard just gives up by the time it gets to Jamie, because she's been punched around so much. So I love that sort of comedy element of fighting works as well. It's a fun direction. It's definitely showing adventure. Maloney's direction is quite fun and quite interesting, and it's worth a watch just for the way it's put together with the budget they've got. I mean, they're effectively stretching a story that probably was about 4 or 5 episodes into 10, and my God, they make a good job of it. And it's not often you can do that in Doctor Who. The music is Dudley Simpson. He's not got to the 5-piece band setup he's got now. He's starting to use a bit of synthes there. The kind of going through the airways kind of telegraph, and the bit of synth that goes over that with the synth organ is quite cool. He introduces the organ as a kind of big thing. The synth organ is a big thing for the Time Lords and makes them all so powerful. He runs that through in the Deadly Assassin as well. I don't know if he does it. I don't think he does it in Invasion of Time, but he certainly puts it in there. And it's interesting seeing the musical cues as complementing it. No, they're not. It's not overriding. None really of the classic series has music underlying all the way through. There are a lot of quiet elements, and it just punctuates it. But it works for what we've got, and it doesn't offend. It really doesn't offend, and it works for me because of that. Overall, it's a lovely run, a lovely romp. There is a slowness, as I say, between 2, 3 and 4, just a tad. It runs at a pace from 5 onwards, and the introduction of the Time Lords, the way the Time Lords are introduced, their omnipotence that comes across at the end is brilliant as well. There is a kind of compassion there shown by the second Time Lord at one point, which is interesting, or third Time Lord, I can't remember. It's one of the two. Is interesting, but it's still fun. It's still worth a watch. And if you want a binge watch of a story, this probably will be for you. Overall, I would give it a rating of 4 TARDISes out of 5. That surprised me as well, but there we are. So, out of all the 50 stories done so far, where does the War Games sit in all that? The War Games sits in at 4 TARDISes out of 5 alongside The Visitation, The Green Death, An Earthly Child, the following story to it, Spearhead from Space, Horror of Fang Rock, and The End of the World. At the top is still 4.5 TARDISes out of 5, The Happiest Patrol, Inferno, The Day of the Doctor, The Caves of Androzani, Tomb of the Cybermen, and Dalek. And at the bottom, with 2.5 TARDISes out of 5, is Time Lash and Sleep No More. That's it for this review. Tell me what you think down below, leave a comment. The playlist of all the other reviews are up there, all the other 49. And next month is Who Month, so you get 5 Doctor Who reviews. But you also get an extra little thing, because in the premiere video, which will be the first Sunday of November, you will get my favourite Doctor Who reviews. That's the 7th of November, 4 PM GMT. It's a YouTube premiere, the first time I've done this on the channel. And you get to see my 5 favourite Doctor Who reviews from the past 50 in their full glory. Anyway, apart from that, next month, lots of interesting things, an interesting start to a different way of doing the reviews and a different strand to the reviews, which is interesting. And also, the way the ratings show up is going to change a little bit as well. So that'll be interesting for you to come and join me with next month. The first review of next month will be the Ribos Operation, the first of the Key to Time series. And I'm doing the Pirate Planet and the Stones of Blood, along with 3 Doctors and another story, which I'll leave more details for nearer the time. Next week is a Kidstructor. Now, I never thought this would come out. It's Visionaries that I recorded with Arthur back in February. It was supposed to be up in June, and there was content ID issues. That's now changed. I am now able to release it. So next week you get to see the Kidstructor with me and Arthur on Visionaries. The following week is the channel update, and then we go into Who Month on the 7th of November. So hopefully you can join me for all that. If you like this video, don't forget to like it and share it with the hashtag teamstructor, and don't forget that subscribe button and the notifications bell so you know when a new video comes out. General new video every Sunday at 4 PM GMT. That will be the case next Sunday with the Kidstructor. I will see you then. Until then, thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you later.